Second item is the presentation from the City Manager on the Waldorf. We'll start with the report from the City Manager on the Waldorf Hotel. Dr. Ballem.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor and Council. Welcome back. What I thought I would do is, this issue has come up very quickly over the last week or so, and I just want to acknowledge the support that I've had from both the General Manager of Planning and Development Services and his staff and other colleagues across the arts and culture sector and out in the Vancouver Economic Commission, just around thinking about this. So what I thought I would do, Council, is just give you a summary of the background on this issue and our suggestions from staff in terms of what steps could be taken to try and just stabilize the situation. I just want to preface it by, there's been a lot of media and a huge amount of interest on the social media around the issue related to the Waldorf, and I just want to remind you, because there's some really important things that we as a city need to remember. We have some very, very significant metrics around, the city of Vancouver and Council's commitment to the arts and culture. In reviewing these issues for various reasons over the last few months, it's really clear that the metrics show that we as a city are the highest per capita funder of arts and culture of any city in Canada. But really of critical importance in this discussion, that we have the highest per capita number of artists in our city of any city in Canada. So we have a creative economy that is second to none in this country. And I think, we as city staff are experiencing, as you are, there's a pretty dramatic shift and an evolution of what the arts and cultural ecology is in our city and everywhere, and the evolving nature of how business is done in that arena, what our young upcoming emerging artists want, what our public wants, and it has led to some changes and issues, and traditional organizations are struggling to adapt, and we have hundreds of new organizations that come to us every year looking for a piece of our resources to help them come along, and I think it's a very exciting place to be, and our job as a city is to try and enable stabilizing issues like the Waldorf Hotel situation without getting deep into it in areas where it's not appropriate, but actually seeing what we can do as a city to provide a bit of stability, give everybody a bit of a chance and a pause to focus on, well, what are the real issues, and how can we help as a city, and how does the broad community, the business community, the philanthropy community actually also step up to the plate and help out. So really this whole issue arose around the Waldorf, which, as all of you know, this is an icon in the city of Vancouver. And many people from around the whole region have written in and called in on talk shows to say this was part of their past and their young adulthood, or their social connection in our city. It's a very, very important facility and an area of activity to our citizens. And really what precipitated the sort of Save the Waldorf campaign was the public knowledge that there had been a sale agreement for the Waldorf Hotel site and building from a long-standing, long-time property owner who is a family in East Vancouver who's had a long-standing commitment to arts and culture in our city and have enabled all kinds of different activities over the years. And they made a decision, I understand the owners are quite elderly, to actually sell the site. And the agreement is made with Sculptura Developments, and the sale has not actually officially transacted, but there's definitely legal agreements in place. And I think what happened was there was an immediate concern from the broad community and the arts and culture community that, they just assume, okay, well, then this is the end of the hotel, it's going to be demolished, and condominiums are going to rise from the site. And really that was the essence of the sort of rumors and what people were worried about. And there were other issues around the tenancy of the current operating group that is known as Waldorf Productions, that actually has been running the facility itself for, I think, a couple of years, since 2010, that their tenancy issues were in quite, up in the air. So a number of different things that precipitated public concern. just to put this in the context, the Waldorf Hotel site sits within the boundaries of the Grandview Woodland community planning process. And just a quick update on that, and I've got Mr. Jackson here and others who can fill in some of the details that I'm not necessarily familiar with. But essentially, at a high level, the planning process for Grandview Woodland, which was directed by Council, one of 4 community plans that are underway right now in the city, commenced in April 2012. And as you can see, there has been a broad public involvement. We've had close to 50 public meetings already over the last 8 months. Close to 3,000 people have actually attended the public meeting, and that doesn't count the people that are engaged on our website and through various virtual channels that we're using in our public engagement around community planning. There are 4 main themes that are really prevalent in this plan. Culture, because this is, this neighborhood is the focus of a lot of our emerging artists and our cultural activities in the city. Heritage, obviously, is a key issue. Lots of social issues that this community wants to talk about, and as always, housing. As you know, the concerns about a rezoning of this property, to a certain extent, are largely mitigated by the fact that there is an interim rezoning policy in place, approved by council, that basically limits rezoning applications in any community undergoing a community plan. And so that, at the end of the day, in and of itself, this site would be captured by that interim rezoning policy, which would not permit us to bring forward any rezoning requests. But nonetheless, there is an existing zoning, and a new owner or the existing owner could bring forward under a development permit a request to make some changes on the site. So I'll come to that in a minute. The Grandview Woodlands plan will come back to council just under a year from now for review and approval. And as you know, the purpose of those plans is, it goes well beyond land use, but land use decisions and informing future land use decisions and rezonings in the area is a major purpose of a community plan. So here's a high-level view of the Waldorf site, and with the hotel on the right. And this property is currently zoned MC2, and I won't ask you too many details about MC2, but what I do know is it's mixed commercial and industrial, and in fact there is only one very, very limited kind of residential that you can build on that site, and that is sort of caretaker units for other industrial commercial activities. So this is not a zoning that's currently on the site that would permit residential. So I think to first address some of the concerns that the community has, is, pending the outcome of the Grandview Woodlands plan, which is underway, at this point, the zoning on the site, is not in any way conducive to residential. And there is a heavy industrial area adjacent and to the north of the site, and I think council has, given us clear direction that, and it's part of our regional growth strategy and a lot of the regional initiatives that we do need to be thoughtful about protecting our industrial land. So all of those things go into consideration. In terms of heritage, this is a facility that was opened in 1947. I think you're all familiar with the famous Tiki Lounge that was renovated first in 1955. And this actual property has been the subject of heritage discussion over the last 15 years with the Heritage Interiors Project, which basically noted this site and said it was of interest. However, it has not officially been put on the Heritage Register, and as you'll see, there's never been a statement of significance undertaken for the Waldorf Hotel. And I think, not being someone who is an original Vancouverite, I came out here in the 1970s, and I have to confess to you, Council, I was busy trying to learn biochemistry and anatomy, and I never got to the Tiki Lounge. But I know many of you did, and I learned that it has been a really key social gathering place for our whole city and particularly our East Side community, and it has evolved, and the venue has changed and shifted, and it is really a very important arts and cultural venue. And I think we saw on the weekend where we had some pretty heavy hitters in our arts and culture community down there speaking to the importance of this site and what a key role it has played as a private hotel in enabling emerging artists and everything to get a chance to strut their stuff. So there's no question, I think we all recognize that it's important to our city. So just listing the current issues. First of all, development. So just to reiterate, there's no possible rezoning at this point in time pending the completion and approval of the Granby Woodlands Community Plan. People are concerned about demolition, and indeed this is a site, as you know, in order to undertake demolition of a building, there are a variety of regulations that regulate that. This is a site that, in fact, if the current owner or a future owner desired, they actually could come in and request a demolition permit. And we would not have the ability to deny that because it's not on the Heritage Register, and the bylaw, because of the nature of the zoning, would allow that to actually happen. And so I'm going to come back to, you know, I think I want to make it very clear that both the current owner and the future owner have indicated they don't have plans to demolish at this time. That's not on their radar screen at the moment. And the city has tools as well to actually ensure that that doesn't happen, that we could have a change of heart or anything like that. And so I'll come back to our option to order up what's called a freeze to allow a heritage assessment that actually would preclude anybody's ability to demolish if they actually decided they wanted to. In terms of the creative economy, the tendency of Waldorf Productions, you know, is an issue, and I think you've read the media, and we've had a number of discussions with the tenants, the owners, the prospective owners, and I think really our stance from the city has been, look, these are private sector entrepreneurs and producers and property owners, and it's not our business to get into their business arrangements. But what we have done is brought them together and encouraged them to keep the dialogue open, you know, to really for everybody to recognize the importance of this site, and you know, to get any support and help that they might need, you know, to move ahead productively in discussions. And I think in the discussions that I had with representatives of the current owner, they really wanted to emphasize to council that they are longtime supporters of this hotel as a cultural hub, that they really feel that that has been a major piece of the role they felt their hotel basically played over many years in this city. And I've talked about the heritage positioning. It's not on the register, it's certainly on the radar screen, and the owner has signaled a very strong interest in cooperating with the city, you know, in terms of how we want to move forward on that. So our recommendation, after discussion with our heritage folks and with Brian Jackson and others, is that we actually use, notwithstanding that the property owner has been quite clear that they don't have any intention of demolishing, and neither does the development, we still believe that in order to actually be fair to everyone and make it very clear that that's not going to happen, that we place a 120-day temporary protection order on the site that relates to the interior and the exterior of the building. And our provision under the charter are the sections 589 and 591 that give us the authority to do that, and they're there specifically to allow the city, you know, to put a fence around something while we expedite the completion of a heritage assessment and report back to council. And the expectations of the city are very clear, like we can't take forever. We have 120 days, we've got to get our statement of significance done. We have to, you know, complete all of the evaluation in terms of heritage, and also enter into discussions with the owner about, you know, what do they think about the feasibility of aligning with that. So if we were to do this, council, if you were to give us direction to put in place a temporary protection order, we would be back under the law before May 15th, 2013 to give the results of the actions of the statement of significance, the evaluation in regard to the Heritage Register, where this site might belong. Is it appropriate for it to be on the register? And then the outcome of discussions with the owner and the purchaser of this site. And just a little bit of background on, because I was asked by a couple of councillors, well, what exactly is a statement of significance? And really it's designed to identify why a property might have heritage value. And it includes, it's a pretty systematic framework. You have a description of the property, you talk about the heritage values, what part it plays in the history of our city, what it represents. And so in this case, it's both a facility heritage piece, but it also, in terms of the heritage aspects of our cultural sector, it also has a historic role. And why we would conclude that this place is of value and needing to be protected over the long term. So Council, that's the end of my presentation. I just want to turn to Mr. Jackson, see, Brian, is there anything else you want to add or anything else remarkable? So we're going to take any questions.
Thank you, Madam City Manager, for that presentation. Report to Council. I'm happy to start off in terms of next steps by putting a motion on the floor, moving the recommendations that have been presented to Council by the City Manager on those next steps. I think the wording is clear there. If the clerk needs anything more.
City Clerk, we'll just get the recommendation page back on. So that would be the implementation of the temporary protection order under charge.
Exactly. So that I'm happy to move that to get things started here. I'm sure the Council will have questions, but within the frame of an immediate step the Council can take. In terms of a motion here, it's an important next step to ensure that the Waldorf Hotel isn't demolished. Although both current and future owners have stated they don't anticipate demolition, but clearly it's important to ensure there's no chance of that in the near term, while there are hopefully changes and accommodation made that enable the cultural facility to keep operating on that site. That sounds like a challenging process ahead between the current operators, Waldorf Productions, and their landlords, but hopefully there's a resolution here that does enable ongoing cultural activity in the near term at the Waldorf, and that we see a positive result from that. I think there's been great concern throughout the city with this potential closure as another sign of big challenge for arts and culture in the city. And we, as we've done over the past 4 years, need to take every step we can as a council to ensure we have a thriving arts and culture community and economy. And I think this is an immediate tool we can use in the mix. But obviously, it's not going to solve the bigger challenge for the operators and landlords who need to resolve their differences. And I'll just say I remain hopeful that there is a resolution on site. That said, there may be the necessity for Waldorf Productions to move, and obviously council and the broader community will be watching that closely and seeing where constructive steps can happen to enable what has emerged as a great cultural hub in Vancouver to carry forward, whether at the Waldorf Hotel site or elsewhere. So, but in the meantime, I think the City Manager, you mentioned that there are generations who have treasured the Waldorf Hotel, and it's been amazing to see the success in drawing crowds to arts events over the past couple of years. It's a huge resurgence at the Waldorf, and that would be a real tragedy to lose for the whole city. So I'll ask Council, first of all, for questions, if there are, or any next steps related to this motion on the recommendation. Councillor Deal, first on the queue.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your very rapid turnaround on this report. I know staff were working hard on it. I have 3 questions. My first has to do with the jobs, the 60 jobs that are on site. Our Vancouver Economic Commission works with us closely on job sites. It works with us closely to retain and attract new hubs for employment. Would it be possible to work with the VEC in terms of the jobs on this site, in terms of if they need to be relocated, what might be a good location for them? Maybe they can offer some assistance with business models that would be successful. Is it possible to engage the VEC on this issue?
Yes, I think Councillor and Council, that's part of the VEC's role, and you know, on a fairly regular basis, I mean, part of their key sort of initiatives are, you know, retention of businesses, and so I've already engaged in discussions with the VEC, and they're very happy, you know, to help enable bringing people together and finding solutions, and often our own real estate group, you know, can give some advice on those kinds of things as well. So that's not in any way out of their scope, and we're happy to do that.
Excellent. Perhaps we can have some comments on that in the May 15th report back to us in terms of the creative economy and the role that these kinds of organizations and places play in that economy. Fantastic. Two other quick questions then. One is around another piece of policy that wasn't referenced here, but is in going into phase 2 and 3 of its rollout, which is our performance-based policies. I see we've got someone from Cultural Services here as well. We currently are promoting policies which will make it easier to have performance spaces in different areas of the city, and it feels to me as if this fits in with that direction that we have in terms of our policy work right now. Perhaps that could be briefly addressed.
Yes, I can give you a high-level overview of that, and I think we have other people from culture. That's a major area of activity, and you know, even today at council, there's a couple of reports that you can see that are part of our work, following direction from council to enable not just, you know, artist space to perform, but also to produce across our city. So there's a lot of work going on currently, both on the event side and also on the background work that artists need to do to be successful, to enable it and move ahead with some of our sort of long-standing historic zoning regulations that are constraints at this time, and to try and make sense of it. So, you know, when we come back to you, council, we'll reference that, and I think that I know that there's some work being done on the report that is sort of imminent, that we'll be coming back to you with the next step of progress of sort of deregulating and, you know, enabling our artist events to actually take place in more places more often, and, you know, at a lesser cost and sort of bureaucratic hassle.
Yeah, right. Over time. Fantastic, because this just wanted to emphasize that this is in keeping with current, this is in keeping with current policy directions and work that's ongoing.
For sure.
And,
it's all very much aligned.
Excellent. And then my third question has to do with the statement of significance. I've been the Heritage Liaison for some time, and I've seen a lot of these come through. And I know, for instance, a particular house might have who owned it, whether they were head of a railway, or why they had, you know, immigrated to Canada and to BC. And those sort of human stories around the physical buildings are often a key part of the statement of significance. Do we anticipate the statement of significance for the Waldorf will include things such as the longshoremen using it as their living room for many years, and they've got their building nearby? The evolution of a city is conceived, be seen so clearly along Hastings Street. I mean, you can really follow the evolution of Vancouver block by block along Hastings Street. I'm hoping that the statement of significance will include that sort of background as well as the significance of the building itself.
Yeah, I think it's very consistent with what the kind of work that will be done. And I think the nice thing about having a temporary protection order is it's very clear, there's a start and an end. It's very transparent for the owners. You don't need to get into a long negotiation about getting this work done, so it allows us to expedite it and come back to you, council, with a fulsome, comprehensive story of this particular site.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Deal. Councillor Meigs.
Thanks, Ms. Ballem and Dr. Ballem. I think there's a lot of information out there which is not really the city's to collect and clarify, but you mentioned there these statements by the two existing parties there, the current owner and the future owner, not to demolish. Have they indicated to you or the staff at any point whether they intend to operate the bar? Because there's concern among the workers there that the business itself will completely stop. But have you had any sense that they may continue to operate in some other fashion with or without Waldorf Productions?
I haven't had detailed discussions up to this point, and I've been mostly dealing, because the owner is quite elderly, so I've been dealing through their legal representatives, and you know, I think their intention is they would like to keep the hotel active, and in fact, in conversations I've had with the proposed purchaser, they too have a commitment to, you know, looking at keeping the hotel active. So, you know, I think the signals are very positive. The details and whether they're going to run the bar or the restaurant or the lounge, I don't have certainty around that.
Okay. But is it safe to say that if the new owners, once they become the new owners, made a decision right away to make changes at that site, that there would be several years of process, including the completion of Granby Woodlands Plan. In other words, my judgment is there's 2 to 3 year time frame here before anything could happen, even if the city had its foot to the floor to try to get processes completed. Is that fair?
I'm going to ask Mr. Jackson. I think that's fairly accurate. It's a question of the current zoning versus a future rezone.
Through the mayor, Councilor Meigs, the council was very clear when they passed the Granby Woodlands Plan process that only a very limited number of rezonings could be considered in advance of that. As Dr. Ballem pointed out, we will be coming forward to council as part of the 4 area plans. This will likely be the last coming forward in December of 2013. So we would not be processing any major rezonings in this particular area or for this particular property prior to that date. Then we would begin the process of looking at what specifically was appropriate for this property, and that would take some time. It wouldn't be a major rezoning. It's on the face with an industrial area, and therefore, as you pointed out, that would likely be at least a 1-year process. So at the minimum, you'd be looking at a 2-year process from now before we would see any kind of rezoning coming forward to council.
Right, and that could be impacted by the terms of the plan that's adopted by council at the end of this year and a whole set of other factors. So I guess I would just go back to say, based on those comments, if the owner chooses to operate the bar in the meantime, there's nothing in the city's the motion before us today that would impair the operation of the current business either by Woodward or Waldorf Productions or by somebody else. And so there could be several years of activity there, as we've seen it, or is something professional without any risk?
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct.
All right, thanks very much.
Thanks, Councilor Meigs. Councilor Paul.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Ballem, very much for an excellent report. I particularly appreciate you referring to several things, and I just want to clarify those. You speak of stability here, and from what I hear you say, and from what I understood from my knowledge of the MC2, is that there isn't an emergency here. There is a difficult situation for an operator, which is a commercial operator, and that is sad. But that is something that could be worked out or can be worked out over the years. But that specifically with MC2, you cannot do anything in that area in terms of condos. And so when you refer to rumor, and I know that I think I've read maybe 40 articles on this and certainly hundreds of emails, that knowing that there can be no rezoning in that area and certainly no condos in that area because it is right next to the port and right next to chicken processing plants and everything that would make it unpleasant to live there, which is why the city very, very sensibly decided that we can't have condos there. So I think you reminding us of that is very, very important. The fact that the building is not on the Heritage Register, and it's great to be able to have that clarified, could you also let us know what is the list of buildings waiting to be registered or to undergo the examination for a registry in the city at this time?
I'm just going to ask Marco maybe.
Marco D'Agostini, Senior Heritage Planner. We don't have, there's a number of studies that have been done over the years, like the Interiors Project that did identify the Waldorf as having some potential heritage value. As individual sites come forward, we do bring them forward through the Statement of Significance Review and Heritage Register evaluations through the Heritage Commission. So it's more of a one-off process as they come forward for development or for consideration that they come forward to you as well.
So the city doesn't have a list of buildings waiting to go on the register, but are waiting for examination. It was my understanding that we did have a substantial list of buildings that we were supposed to move forward on.
As I said, there's a number of studies that have identified sites that have potential heritage value, and as each of these come forward, like we found out about this one, for example, then we either ask an owner or the city might undertake that next step, which is the SOS and Heritage Register evaluation.
And who pays for that evaluation, and how does that happen?
Typically, if it's a development scenario, the developer or the owner of the property will undertake that. In certain circumstances, when there's an urgent issue like this one, the city might undertake that, or we might, in terms of hiring a consultant, or on occasion it's done by staff if we have the ability to do the timing and resources.
So at this point, there is no redevelopment, so it's more likely that the city will actually be paying for it.
Yeah, well, and we want to do it within, as Dr. Ballem noted, within a 120-day period to make sure that we get some clarity very quickly on the heritage value of the site.
Excellent, and I think that helps to clarify for people too how this process moves forward. So again, I'd like to thank you both for the clarification. I think it's extremely important because it's been kind of like watching sort of a peony, the dizzying twists and turns of this ride and the amount of misinformation that's out there. I think it's really important that things be clarified. So thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ball. Councillor Carr is next.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, let me also thank you for the report. I must admit I have been busy until yesterday in real tiki lounges in Hawaii. This certainly has transpired quickly, and I've been following the information. So I'm happy to see council respond. I think it is appropriate to have a report to council, and I wish that had happened around our Venus Ridge bowling. And I hope that doesn't mean tiki lounges are more important than bowling. I have some very specific questions here, which have to do with the 120-day temporary protection order. What are the conditions under which that could be granted? In other words, can there be, my question really is around, can there be no development application in process or anything like that? Is it just the conditions for the 120 days?
My understanding, but essentially, this is in the charter, and if the city feels that a potential heritage asset is at risk, it can use this. So there's not terribly rigid criteria, and it's really our assessment of a threat and the risk that allows us to do that. And which is why I think that the time frame, even though 120 days sounds like a long time, to do this kind of work, it's not very long, but it holds us to that time frame. It can't be more than that.
Is it renewable?
I don't know, Councillor. I don't think so. Once every 2 years.
Okay, so it would not be immediately renewable. So it expires May 15th. We'll have a report at that time. But in terms of the plan of completion for Grandview Woodlands in December, there's still going to be a demolition permit. Is that right?
Well, if it's designated heritage, then there would be a process that a property owner would have to go through. They can't just come in and get a demolition.
We know by the lead residents in the West End that heritage, Class A heritage houses can be demolished. So would that only be if there is an actual development permit issued? In other words, if it was designated heritage.
You have to have a development permit.
All right, so then there would be nothing that could happen.
Well, no, we can, unless I'm mistaken, during rezoning, we can issue a development permit under the current zoning. We would have to take into consideration the heritage, and that then would be the negotiation, and that's why we put that piece in place. So we have to issue the development permit, and if it's heritage, that would have had to have been settled with the city. So is that correct? Yes. So that's the step. The problem right now is that under this particular area and bylaw, law has advised us that, in fact, the property owner could actually come in and request a demolition permit, and we would have no way not to issue that, frankly. So that's what this is about. It's like saying, okay, we're going to wrap a fence around it for 120 days under the charter. We're going to take an expedited, statement of significance and heritage assessment. If we deem that it should be heritage and Vancouver agrees, the City Council agrees to put it in the register, well then, if they then wish to proceed to demolish, they've got to come in and get a DP. And if they're not going to rezone, they can do that they could decide to build a mixed commercial industrial building and demolish the Waldorf Hotel, but they can't do that without engaging with us and us agreeing to a development permit.
Okay,
is that clear?
Yeah, yes. So I understand that then we at least have until one assumes either we at least have another chance at the council table to examine this if this 120 days. Okay, and zoning. By the way, my last question. You did mention something about zoning constraints, and I'm not sure what you intended in that response to I think Councillor Deal's question. I'm looking at zoning myself more as a protective measure, i.e. the zoning that's there will not allow the kind of development that potentially the new owner may want.
Right, I was talking about I think Councillor Deal, if I don't misinterpret, we were talking about some of the bylaw and regulatory constraints on artist production studios in our industrial areas. And it's related more to old definitions and that sort of thing. So it wasn't related to this site and redevelopment. It was really, we were talking a bit about encouraging the artistic and cultural sector in terms of their production spaces, their event spaces. And it was really that we have some old bylaws that actually just the way they're written and the definitions and the language used is out of date. And so we're trying to update that. So an artist production space, as you'll see in the report today, actually has the ability to happen, and we defined it, and it's just modernizing our bylaws.
Okay,
thank
you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. Or Councillor Affleck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. Besides the mayor DJing there and Vision Vancouver using this venue as a fundraising venue,
Actually,
I wonder if you can define what...
just to set the record straight, I have not DJ'd at all.
Okay, sorry. Besides Vision Vancouver using this as a fundraising venue, I'm wondering, I know you like to DJ, so I thought that was one of your holdouts places. Besides Vision Vancouver fundraising there, can you define the difference between the Waldorf and us going through this process and the Ridge and the Pantages? What makes this so different when we heard so many people literally walking to the steps of our building here, the City Hall, outraged by us not protecting those venues? What makes this different than those two venues?
Well, I think, Council, a couple of things, just to be clear. This is a process to actually assess take this through a structured assessment of its heritage value. We're not, at this point, what we're doing is this is a precautionary step that is permitted, through the charter and very purposely permitted to allow City Council, which normally has rather long, cumbersome processes, to actually take action nimbly to say, okay, we don't have enough information to know whether we should be protecting this, but we've got 120 days now to actually undertake that. It doesn't actually assume the outcome at all. I think that's the work that staff will have to do, to go and do the proper assessment and say, well, is this really a heritage asset, and if so, based on what? And that has to go through the formal process of how we assess heritage. So we're not concluding that's going to be the answer, but what this does is it allows us a pretty short time frame to actually get the homework done, to actually be able to bring forward that particular discussion and decision.
But that doesn't answer my question. What makes this venue different than the Ridge? When we heard, the mayor talks about the citizens saying this is outrageous, how could this happen to our cultural hub? Well, the Ridge could argue the same thing. People of the Ridge in the bowling alley there who came to the City Hall protested, and the mayor didn't stand up for them. I'm wondering what makes this venue different?
Well, I think a couple of things. I'm not aware that the Ridge bowling alley was on some of the previous work. I'm not sure it's ever been identified as a heritage structure. I think it's a well-loved recreational activity, and that was a place where it happened. And my whole experience of the discussion around the Ridge was that this was an activity that seniors and others in our community like to engage in, and this was a place where it happened. And the real question around that is, where is it we can make it possible for that kind of thing to happen? The actual building itself, I don't believe had a statement of significance done, is that right? No. And it's never been identified or flagged by our heritage folks or the Heritage Commission. So I think it was a place where the community was concerned that they might be losing something, just like we've seen, since I've been here at the City Council, we've had cafes that have closed and all kinds of things that have happened, and the community says, oh, this is a loss for us. I used to go there and like the diner, under where Chapter's bookstore is now. There's a lot of places that, turn over and get redeveloped that people miss and are, upset about. And the city obviously can't be saving all of those because they're owned by private property owners. But this does have something of significance in that it's been on the list of something that is likely of heritage interest. The homework has not been done, and that's what we're embarking on.
Okay, I won't dwell on it. Maybe the mayor can answer that question for me. I'd appreciate it. How often do we do this kind of aggressive move? This development, this piece of property is, as you said, right in the middle of the transaction. It actually hasn't completed the transaction. So our responsibility as councillors to be involved and jump in at this point when there's a deal on the table between two private companies the impact this decision today might have. Can you describe what impact that might have on that deal? And when have we done this in the past year? Any time when we've come in right in the middle of a negotiation between two private sector companies and presented this, which changes the scenario quite a lot for the purchaser, I would say.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I don't have the answer to all the instances. I do know this was used, I believe, for the York Theatre. That was probably my first day at City Hall, and I remember that distinctly. And you know, essentially, I think you're quite right that you know we have to. This is not something that we throw around at a whim, and it's a very serious thing for us to bring to you as a staff recommendation that we use this section of the charter to actually provide a temporary protection. And so it's something we use unusually. Yes, that's why I took the time on the weekend to make sure that I had a chance to sit down with the purchaser of the property. And I wasn't able to sit down with the property owner, but I talked to their legal representative and went through it all. And you know, they both shared with me that they actually welcomed the city being so clear. They welcomed a process that was going to not be endless and really, as you say, befuddle their ongoing legal transaction. And both indicated a strong willingness to want to work with us. And I think that the current owner, you know, has indicated through his representative that they're very committed to the hotel, and they're quite actually interested in seeing the results of this study and to see if the city is you know, going to determine that it is of significance and play a role perhaps in trying to preserve it.
So there's no way it puts us into a litigious situation if the deal falls apart and we potentially are put in any sort of liable situation where we've taken a position here that has affected a real estate deal, which I understand is a significant thing we have to be very careful about here at City Hall. That this doesn't put us as councillors in any sort of precarious situation.
No, councillor, that you know, we're doing this under an existing statute, which is the Vancouver Charter. We have the right to do this. As I say, it's not something that we do on a whim. It's a very serious thing to do, and you're not at any risk, I can assure you of that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, Councillor Reimer's next.
Oh, well, before I ask questions, I should disclose, Councillor Affleck, I did have lunch there on my birthday last year, and it's not going to affect my vote today at all. Most of my questions are on zoning, so I'll direct them to you, but just give you a warning. So, Mr. Jackson, Councillor earlier was asking about emergency, or is there an imminent threat? And you stated no, but that's in relation specifically to condos. There is the possibility under the MC2 zoning that the building could be ripped down at any point and something built there under the existing zoning.
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so the demolition freeze would prevent that from happening essentially.
That's correct.
Okay. In terms of the planning process that's ongoing, you said it'd be a minimum of, we'll get the plan back from the community and staff in December, and then it would be a minimum of a year, but that presumes that there's a recommendation in that report in December to change the zoning for this area.
Through the mayor, yes, that's correct.
Okay, and there's no presumption on either side of that. It's up to the community and staff to look at what the current needs are in the community and provide recommendations to council in December that may or may not include a possibility of rezoning at any site.
Through the mayor, this has been identified previously as a let-go area. However, as previous councillors have indicated, the proximity of the active port uses immediately adjacent have resulted in us looking very carefully at whether these properties are suitable in the long term for residential, but it is something we're looking at to see if there is some kind of buffer that we provide between future residential and the existing industrial. So that will all be wrapped up into the area plan.
And in terms of reference to the plan, I remember the debate and was one of the strong proponents of preserving the industrial, but in terms of reference specifically say that literally right across the alley, the M1 zoning cannot be changed by the planning process. It will absolutely stay industrial no matter what the result of the planning process.
through the mayor, the planning process that is underway is not looking in any detail at the existing zoning to the north of the lane. You're looking at that being a stable industrial area, not only under the city's plan, but also under the regional growth strategy as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Reimer. And Councillor Ball, I have you on the queue.
At the end, if I can just throw my time.
Yeah, you are the last speaker on the queue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a follow-up question, just following up Councillor Deal's suggestion that the employees of the Waldorf be given some assistance through the Economic Commission. I'm just wondering if that kind of assistance was also available to the, say, the Playhouse Theatre, and which was a non-profit as opposed to commercial establishment, and if it certainly had more than 60 employees who were let go and did not have jobs anymore, many of whom still do not have jobs. So I'm wondering if that assistance applies also to our major cultural institutions.
So through the mayor and council, Councillor Ball, I think I didn't interpret from in my response to Councillor Deal that we would be giving employees assistance. What I think we would do is ask the Vancouver Economic Commission to just, keep an eye on those discussions, so that if Waldorf Productions per se is looking to move its activities somewhere else in the city, that the job of the Economic Commission is to provide advice and help. It's not to help individual employees. It's to help employers and companies be successful in our city. So, if they often come to the commission and say, well, where are the zoning areas where we could locate? And sometimes they'll come to the city and ask us that, but that's part of the role of the commission. And just to, go back to the Playhouse Theatre, I can assure you, because I was heavily involved in, probably 2 years of discussions with the Playhouse, and everybody in the cultural sector, in our finance department, the VEC, neighboring public sector institutions like VCC, there were a lot of us involved in trying to ensure that, that the Playhouse landed in a way that was as least dislocative of the arts and cultures community, the people with jobs and everything. And, that's part of our role as a city. We can't take on individual employees, but, VEC can give the organization some advice on, where might they move to if they can't continue with the Waldorf and what can happen. And that's real well within their scope.
I'm aware of the enormous work that the city itself did. I was wondering about the VEC.
Yes, they were involved for sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Ball. And that is all for the speaking queue. I'll just add some closing comments before I call the question on the motion that's on table. First of all, I'd like to thank the City Manager and our staff team for their swift action to bring this to Council today. I'll just remind everyone, we've had over 10,000 signatures on a petition for Council to do what it can. In about 5 days, there has been a remarkable response from the community calling for a solution here. This may not be a solution that solves the predicament, but it's clearly a next step that can prevent the demolition of the hotel and get some time to work towards resolving the differences on site. But there's still lots of work to do on that front, and it would be good to see the Vancouver Economic Commission help out, given there are 60 jobs at stake. But I think the cultural value of this hub to the city is very significant. That said, Council's been very consistent for over 4 years in doing everything we can in these situations to protect our arts and culture institutions. We've done it repeatedly. We did it 4 years ago with the York Theatre, with this tool specifically, and we expect that theatre will be reopened and as brand spanking new in this year. So we've had other instances where the tools of Council could not save a cultural institution. Resources have been applied to this regularly, but sometimes change is inevitable, and Council isn't able to protect an institution or organization, and that's unfortunate. But in this case, there's a clear tool that we can use as a next step, and we are hopeful that the Waldorf Productions and landlord and new buyer of the site can work through their differences, and Vancouver continues to have a great culture hub with the Waldorf Productions people, and that site remains an important part of Vancouver's future. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. Thank you, Council, and we will stay tuned for next steps from our staff on that front.